It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman. I'm here with Cindy Black, our executive director here at Redeemer Radio for Theology of the Body Thursday. Thanks for being here, Cindy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
What do you have for us today regarding theology of the body?
Well, Andrea mentioned, I think it's been over a month ago, a new study that was released by Leonard Sachs. He does research on gender differences. He does studies on the biological differences of males and females. Actually, first I want to start with a quote directly from St. John Paul II's Theology of the Body, and then go into the study a little bit, just to show the wisdom of the church and St. John Paul II and the way God created us. JP2 says, later when Eve is created, Adam understands, as soon as he lays eyes on her, that men and women are fundamentally alike, yet different in complementary ways. Before she even speaks a word, Eve's body reveals all this and more. The body reveals the person. This phrase tells us all there is to know about the body. Science can examine our flesh in minute detail, down to our cells and even our DNA. But no amount of scientific exploration can replace the truth that our bodies reveal us, giving form to our innermost being and unique personality. Our bodies are sacramental. They make the invisible visible. So he says that we can't know all there is to know through science, but we can learn a lot about who we are and how we were created through science.
Sure.
So a lot of Leonard Sachs' research has been criticized or been written off to nurture over nature. When he comes up with differences about males not being able to hear as well as females, especially certain frequencies. People will say, well, that's because boys are exposed to louder things from the get-go and things like that.
Right.
With women being able to express emotion more readily. It's because they're socialized to talk about emotions more, you know. But this new study that Leonard Sachs and others have done have found connections in the brains of unborn babies. So they have not been treated differently as far as toys or how the world is interacted, because they're basically in the exact same environment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
In these studies, it wasn't like the mothers and fathers knew that it was a boy, so they handled the pregnancy differently.
Right.
Okay. So basically what they discovered in looking at the activity in fetal brains is that in female babies, there were way more connections between the lobes of the brain than in the male brain. So the fetal brain frontal cortex definitely varies with sex. There are distinct differences that they can see prior to birth. So the human brain is gendered prior to birth. We can no longer say that it's all nurture, that it's how we're socializing or how the world is forming boys and girls. There are distinct differences that are hardwired and innate. Sachs really looked at, how does thinking happen? How does the brain mediate the process of our thoughts or feelings? And that we don't know yet. We just know that there are major differences. So far he hasn't tried to claim what the differences signify, but they do know the differences are there. And just because they haven't identified exactly what they signify doesn't mean that we should ignore the science.
Well, it just makes sense. I mean, there are so many differences between the male and female body. As much as we are similar, there's also very obvious differences from organs and physical features. It only makes sense that that would also cross over into other areas like the brain, and that there would be different actual physical scientific differences in our brain structure.
Right. So some of the research in the past has tended to look at children and learning. so many social scientists look at poverty or like socioeconomic backgrounds. They'll look at behaviors of the parents. They'll look at things like that. But many of the studies ignore whether it's a male or female. They try to lump males and females together, thinking that there's no difference, that anything that is shown as a difference has been because of how they're socialized rather than a difference in their brain, how they learn, and how they really have their being.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful once we acknowledge and embrace these things. It's not to say that socialization doesn't have an impact, but when we know that there's biological differences and connections in the brain that are different in males and females, then we can really discredit the practice of parents letting their children decide their gender.
Right. I think another issue would be in our expectations for the way maybe males versus females learn or behave in different situations, to say that we can have the exact same expectations for both males and females, just as long as we institute that at a younger age so they grow up with those expectations, might be setting up one or the other for failure because we're not created the same mentally, And I kind of look at this, I'm wondering, we have some schools that are all male or all female. And I think there's pros and cons to that. I mean, obviously, we need to be working together in the workplaces and stuff. And so we should be able to work together as males and females. But is there advantages to separating the males and females in our schools more often because of different learning styles, because of different brain design?
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the things that led Leonard Sachs to start looking at some of this research. He was seeing way more parents come in with boys whose teachers had suggested that they be diagnosed to see if they have ADHD or ADD.
Sure.
And he was noticing that it was overwhelmingly more boys than girls. Not saying that he didn't see girls, but it was definitely overwhelming. And it's in the elementary school years that this was happening. One of the studies and conclusions that he has been able to draw is that boys don't hear soft voices as well as girls do. So if you have a boy at the back of the classroom and you have, the majority of grade school teachers are females.
Sure.
If you have a boy who's in first grade sitting at the back of the room and you have a teacher who's being gentle and talking and teaching the kids because, they're young and in her natural femininity wants to be nurturing to them. The boy sitting at the back of the room may not be able to hear it, so then is looking out the window and not paying attention because what first grade boy wants to raise his hand and say, I can't hear what you're saying.
Maybe the boy wouldn't even be able to articulate that I can't hear because he could hear, but the more you have to work to hear something, the more likely you are to not do that work. And so for a third grader to say, I can't hear, well, that maybe isn't true.
Right.
But to say that I struggle being able to focus
listen.
because I have to work so hard to hear and listen, that might be hard for them to articulate. And realize it. It just seems like, I can't pay attention.
Right.
I need medicine.
Right. Contrary to that, so boys actually learn better and pay attention better if there's a louder, stronger voice that's giving instruction one step after another. Whereas girls tend to listen better with a softer voice, kind of explaining like a process, like the whole thing. And I know we've talked about this before, but it's so interesting to think about if a teacher stands up and starts speaking loudly, the girls actually learn less because they feel like they're being shouted at or they did something wrong. So there's kind of a shame attributed. The differences don't just start with that, like sense of smell. We have different capabilities in sense of smell. Then with the more connections that women have between the lobes of their brain, the different sections of their brain, is thought to be a reason why women can multitask generally better. Now, all of these things, as I say, are generalizations, and there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. There are going to be females that don't hear as well as males. But when you look at the research, they account for those variables, and they're still able to draw the conclusion. Another interesting difference about our brain being organized is pain perception. Even women, their pain perception changes with pregnancy.
Oh, interesting.
So women who are tested and questioned about a level of pain that's administered to them are more tolerant of the pain when they're pregnant. Even within a woman's brain, there are differences with those hormones and with the mindset.
Right.
And that in general, male brains, if something is painful, it's seen as a challenge, like something to overcome rather than to something to avoid. So it lights up different portions of the brain as different opportunities are exposed.
Makes me think of it's not about the nail.
Right. Yeah.
That guy's trying to solve the problem, and the woman's like, I just need somebody to listen. And
Right.
that idea that we are created differently.
Right. The brain science also shows that when there's an object presented, the female brain tends to question, what is it? And a male brain tends to think, where is it? So there's more of a spatial element or aspect or strength to the male brain and more of an object kind of focus. Don't be confused with viewing people as objects, but looking at what something is. So there's the object discrimination. They want to discriminate what the object is, whereas where it's located. Another interesting thing is that when young children are given crayons or something to color with, female little girls tend to draw nouns, whereas boys try to draw verbs.
Okay.
So a girl will draw like a flower, but the boy might draw something jumping and try to indicate the motion, or something shooting and trying to make the shooting, even if they're not, like, these are differences in the brain, not things that they're socialized to do. Also, girls tend to want to use more colors in their coloring. Boys usually just want to use a couple of colors. And often, sometimes just the exact same color is fine with them, because it's not so much about the object, it's about creating a sense of motion. Another interesting thing is the notion of collaboration versus competitiveness. Other interesting things is girls are more likely to learn through role playing, whereas boys are probably more likely through abstract kind of examples, whereas girls can get lost on the abstract. They want to role play and have like a real life situation to compare it to. And there's an interesting thing in Why Gender Matters, where it examines how the book Lord of the Flies is taught, that when a female teaches it, she'll say things like, how would you feel if you were this character? Because boys' emotion center is on the opposite side of their language center, they're not thinking about how the characters feel.
Yeah.
Whereas girls can readily empathize. That's how they tend to think, is how would that make somebody feel? So all of this research, it starts in our brain, whether we're male or female, before we're even born. And these differences really exist. And when we ignore those differences and want to say, oh, we're all the same, we're just socialized differently, we really aren't honoring the dignity of the person as uniquely made as male and female. That even though like income levels impact learning and reading and things like that, we cannot ignore the differences that we have between males and females.
Right. All right. That's all great. And I feel like there's a lot more that we could even break down within this, but we're kind of running out of time. So thank you so much for joining us, Cindy, for another Theology of the Body Thursday. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.